The only rookie in Formula 1 this year is one that had a poor reputation going into the season. Zhou Guanyu is a pay driver and reportedly offers the team up to €30 million in financial support from his sponsors. But despite this, he's proving a lot of people wrong this year with some strong performances up against Valtteri Bottas, and many believe he should stay there for next season. So how is Zhou proving us all wrong? Let's have a look. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. A turbulent path to Formula 1. At 23 years old, Zhou Guanyu is one of the older rookies to enter the sport in recent times. One of the reasons for this was Zhou's long path to the top tier. The Chinese driver spent 3 unconvincing years in F3 with 13th in 2016 and then 2 8th place finishes in the championship in the subsequent years. In that series he didn't get his first win until the 3rd season in 2018, so it wasn't exactly like he set the world alight. This was then followed by another 3 improved years in F2 with 7th, 6th and 3rd in the standings. So Zhou was competitive in the feeder categories, but he was never exceptional. So this is perhaps a reason why many people had their doubts over the driver as he entered his rookie season in F1. We've arguably been spoiled by the talented drivers that have been promoted to F1 over the last 5 years, with many young drivers delivering in their first few years in the sport. Not only this, but so many drivers have had a fast route into F1, with drivers such as Lando Norris, George Russell and Charles Leclerc spending just a single full season in F2 before moving up to F1. As such, it's easy to compare these drivers to Zhou Guanyu and assume that the Chinese driver is simply not talented enough to compete on the grid. However, different drivers improve at different speeds, and with so much time in the traditional feeder series, I think Zhou was probably more prepared for F1 as a result. And if you were to just look at the standings of the F1 Championship right now, you'd perhaps assume that Zhou isn't performing for Alfa Romeo, but that really doesn't show the full story. Before we take a look at Zhou's F1 performances, I want to take a moment to ask you to subscribe to Behind the Drive. According to my analytics, roughly 70% of you watching right now aren't yet subscribed, so please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Poor luck, but constantly learning. Zhou's F1 career got off to an excellent start. He joined an Alfa Romeo team that had significantly improved with the new regulations and managed to secure a point on his F1 debut in Bahrain. Now admittedly, Valtteri Bottas, Zhou's new teammate, performed well in Bahrain also, with a 6th place finish. But comparing Zhou to a driver that's been in the sport since 2013 and has just spent 5 years with Mercedes isn't exactly a fair comparison for a rookie. Zhou's start to the season was strong and he followed this up with 2 11th place finishes in Saudi Arabia and Australia. But then what followed was a run of rookie-esque errors and bad luck. The Imola sprint race saw Zhou try to make a move on Gasly around the outside of turn 9 on lap 1. It was deemed to be a racing incident by the stewards, but it was an optimistic move from the rookie driver to try and go around the outside when there's not exactly a lot of room for 2 cars to go through the corner. Gasly's front right hit the side pod of the Alfa Romeo, sending him into the barriers and destroying the rear end of the car. This sent Zhou to the back of the order, and he ended up starting in the pit lane after the team repaired the car during Parc Ferme. So despite this not necessarily being the rookie driver's fault, it's one of those moves that the driver will have surely learned from, given it ruined the rest of his weekend and he ended up 15th on Sunday. Following this disappointing result, Zhou had a string of bad luck. In Miami, Zhou retired on lap 6 with a water pressure issue. Despite starting that race in 17th, the Chinese driver was optimistic given the Alfa Romeo's car's pace and he believed he could score points if it wasn't for that issue. The following race in Spain saw Zhou suffer another engine issue on lap 28. And then following a 16th place finish in the wet conditions of Monaco, the Chinese driver suffered his 3rd retirement in 4 races in Azerbaijan with yet another reliability problem, this time with the hydraulics. So Zhou was suffering a huge amount of bad luck through the start and into the middle of his rookie season. This luck did turn in Canada, with Zhou starting 10th and moving up to 8th position, so he was finally able to score more points at the 9th round of the 2022 season. Not only this, but it was starting to look like he was gathering momentum, and actually starting to compete more closely with Valtteri Bottas. This brings me nicely on to a good comparison with the Finnish driver. Bottas is a strong qualifier. It was one of the few areas where his performances were regularly matching that of Lewis Hamilton on a Saturday when he was racing at Mercedes. Bottas got through to Q3 103 times in a row in a streak that ended earlier this year. So this shows that the Finnish driver is incredibly consistent and fast, and a very tough benchmark. So, as before, it's unrealistic to expect Zhou to match Bottas in this department in his rookie season. And at the time of recording, Bottas does lead 8-3 in qualifying. But Zhou's 3 results came in that spell of races from Azerbaijan through to the British Grand Prix, and it was a sign of the rookie driver starting to find his feet and build up some momentum. So with Zhou on the upward trajectory going into the mid-season period, it was a shame that his poor luck returned. The signs of his luck turning in Canada were swiftly turned back after his crash at the start of the British Grand Prix, where he was trapped and flipped off into the catch fence in a scary incident. Since that time, Zhou's not been able to recover his form, just as he was looking close to a breakthrough. He's since had a disappointing result in Austria and yet another power unit related retirement in France. Zhou's future in Formula 1. So Zhou's situation is an interesting one. Right now, he sits on 5 championship points compared to Valtteri Bottas's 46. However, I think everyone right now can see that the rookie driver has had the bulk of the bad luck in the Alfa Romeo team, with so many reliability issues over the season so far. Zhou Guanyu is also very aware of his situation. He's in a position where his seat is potentially available for next year. He's on a single-year deal with Alfa Romeo, and the team have a junior driver in Théo Pourchaire that will be in with a chance of getting that seat in the near future. Following the Miami Grand Prix, Zhou stated that he hoped his luck would turn around the mid-season when it matters most. This shows that the Chinese driver is aware that he needs to impress if he wants to keep hold of that seat going into next season. After I released my video highlighting the key drivers in the 2023 transfer market, there were many comments discussing the fact that Zhou should be given more time in the Alfa Romeo, and switching to Pourchaire would just be a decision that would put the team in the same spot as before, just a little bit less well off financially. I can see this perspective, as Alfa Romeo are in good form right now relative to last year, and there's definitely some uncertainty in choosing Pourchaire over Zhou, especially given the Chinese driver is finding his feet in the sport and will likely continue to improve next season with a year under his belt. Meanwhile, Pourchaire is 39 points behind Drugovich in F2, with 5 weekends of racing to go. At this point, given how F2 tends to be, that lead is by no means insurmountable, and it just takes a few strong weekends to be right back in the hunt for the title. Should that happen, then Alfa Romeo will have a very difficult decision. Pourchaire would be a hot prospect, and it would be terrible if the F2 champion failed to make it to F1 for 2 years in a row, so they would surely have to consider bringing the Frenchman into the sport. But if Zhou finally has a run of good luck, that could complicate things further. The difficult point for Zhou is the fact that the midfield order is changing so often in 2022. Some races, his Alfa Romeo is in the mix of points, but as the season has progressed, there are signs that the team's moving backwards relative to their rivals. This means that as we go into the second half of the season, Zhou's opportunities might be fewer and further between, even if he finally has some good luck over a string of races through the second half. As I said in my driver transfer video, Sauber has invested heavily in the development of Théo Pourchaire throughout his junior career. The driver has been part of the Sauber Academy since 2019 and has gone through F4, F3 and F2 with the driver development program. It feels like he's their pinnacle driver and one that they're desperate to bring onto the F1 grid. So for me, that makes logical sense, but it also depends on the financial situation for the team. 30 million euros is a huge amount of money in F1, so if they can't replace that and need the investment, then keeping hold of Zhou and Bottas is the logical option. One thing that's for sure though, is that whilst Zhou is indeed a pay driver, he has proved a huge amount of F1 fans wrong in 2022. He's not miles behind, and he's faced a huge amount of bad luck. Compared to the other pay drivers out there, he's proving himself the most in 2022, and he's definitely deserving of the seat. For me, it's going to be fascinating to watch what happens next, and if you want to learn more about the driver moves for next season, check out this video next.